Oops, My Apprentice is an Alien. Book 2 of the Interstellar Pest Control series by A.H. Mayweather. Kevin had reorganized Jerome's shed so thoroughly that nothing useful could be found. The chemicals were arranged by molecular hostility. The traps had been sorted by target mass, probable suffering, and something Kevin translated as likelihood of retaliatory swarm behavior. Jerome's screwdriver stood in a coffee can in order of electrical conductivity. Jerome stood in the doorway holding a cup of coffee and regarding the workbench with the suspicion of a man whose property had been improved without permission. "Where's my channel locks?" he asked. Kevin turned from a stack of bait stations. He wore Jerome's oldest gray coveralls. A dark hood covered his head and antennae. Over his face sat a full respirator. Kevin had replaced the filters with catheric equipment. Thin blue lights pulsed inside the cartridges. Around Jerome's neck, the silver translation collar gave a faint, warm pulse as Kevin answered. "Your adjustable gripping implement is in the manual force section." Jerome stared at him. Kevin pointed toward a shelf. Jerome crossed the shed, moved 3 labeled containers, and found the channel locks sealed inside a clear plastic bag. "Why are they quarantined?" "They carried traces of 14 pesticides, engine lubricant, animal blood, fungal spores, fermented grain alcohol, and fecal matter from at least 2 species," Kevin said. Jerome considered that. "Only 2? Kevin made a muffled clicking noise behind the respirator. Jerome set down his cup and pointed the channel locks at him. "I am not taking a rookie across creation on an emergency call when that rookie cannot identify raccoon droppings, set a spring trap, or understand why a customer saying the crawl space is real clean is almost always a lie. I served as a systems technician aboard an interstellar survey vessel," Kevin protested, "and yesterday you classified the shop vacuum as a dormant predator. It possesses an intake orifice and contained hair." "It's a vacuum cleaner, Kevin. It growled when activated." Jerome lowered the pliers. "That part's fair." The ship interrupted. "Systems Technician Kervix possesses advanced xenobiological training." Jerome pointed toward the radio. "You stay out of this. You kidnapped me." "Former command personnel kidnapped you," the ship corrected. "You provided transportation. That distinction may be legally significant." Jerome looked back at Kevin. The alien stood stiffly in the oversized coveralls, respirator humming, boots planted with the anxious precision of somebody awaiting judgment. Jerome sighed. "Today, you watch. You carry what I tell you. You don't scan customers without permission, call anybody livestock, or use ship equipment unless the building is actively leaving the ground." Kevin nodded solemnly. "I accept apprenticeship conditions. You ain't an apprentice yet." The telephone on the shed wall began to ring. Jerome picked it up on the 4th ring, which was early enough to seem professional but late enough not to encourage people. "Pritchard Pest Control." A woman's voice came through fast and breathless. "Mr. Pritchard, there is something in my attic." Jerome reached for his cap. "Well," he told the caller, "that narrows it down." The woman on the telephone introduced herself as Darlene Wicker and immediately informed Jerome that the animal in her attic was a raccoon. Jerome tucked the receiver between his shoulder and ear. "You seen it?" "No, but my husband had one up there in '98. Jerome waited. Darlene did not explain how this qualified the present raccoon. "What time you hearin' it?" he asked. "Mostly at night, sometimes in the afternoon. It walks around, scratches, knocks things over. Any food missing? Half a bag of cat kibble? You got a cat?" "No." Jerome looked toward Kevin. Kevin's dark respirator lenses gave nothing away, but the translation collar around Jerome's neck warmed as the alien said, "The bait was placed intentionally." Jerome covered the mouthpiece. "Sometimes old ladies feed things." "Why?" "Because they are old ladies." He returned to the call. "Anybody been up there?" There was a pause. "My nephew Randy looked." Jerome closed his eyes. "What did Randy do?" "He said it might be a mountain lion. In the attic. He said they climb." Jerome pressed 2 fingers against his forehead. "What did he do, Darlene?" "He put a speaker by the attic door and played wolf noises." Kevin tilted his head. Jerome raised one hand before the alien could ask. Darlene continued. "It got quiet for a while. Then the noises started at the other end of the house. That can happen. Sound carries through ductwork. It started making other noises, too." Jerome stopped reaching for his cigarettes. "What kind?" "The telephone, my microwave, Randy coughing." Kevin stepped closer. "Acoustic mimicry," he said through the mask. Jerome covered the receiver again. "Around here, that usually means somebody's describing the problem wrong." A man's voice suddenly exploded through the telephone. "Jerome, this thing knows I'm on to it." Jerome recognized Randy Tuck immediately. Randy had a voice built for announcing bad plans across parking lots. "Put your aunt back on. I've completed reconnaissance. You played wolf noises into drywall. That flushed it. It's still in the house. Because it adapted." Jerome glanced at Kevin. The alien seemed impressed. "I'm staying to help," Randy declared. "No, I got equipment." That sentence has never improved a situation. Jerome hung up before Randy could explain the equipment. He reached for his cap and pointed toward Kevin. "First lesson. Most jobs got 3 problems. The animal, what the customer thinks the animal is, and what Randy did before we arrived." Kevin nodded solemnly. "Is Randy considered part of the infestation?" Jerome thought about it. "Not under state law." They loaded the truck. Jerome gave Kevin a flashlight, a cage, heavy gloves, and strict instructions not to call anyone livestock, scan anyone's organs, or suggest vaporizing the structure. "If they ask about the mask," Jerome said, "you got a respiratory condition?" "My respiratory organs are functional." "Then your condition is you prefer keeping them that way." Darlene's farmhouse sat beyond a field of dry grass and leaning fence posts. Before Jerome had fully stopped the truck, he noticed the birds. Dozens crowded the power line, shoulder to shoulder, facing the house. A squirrel clung flat against a fence rail. Beneath Darlene's parked Buick, a raccoon crouched in broad daylight, staring up at the attic window. Jerome shut off the engine. Kevin reached for his scanner. Jerome caught his wrist. "Not yet." The raccoon pressed itself farther beneath the car. Jerome studied the roof. "Well," he said quietly, "that ain't normal." Randy was waiting before Jerome had both feet out of the truck. He came around the Buick carrying a hunting rifle, a plastic jug, a black speaker with duct tape around one corner, and a thermal monocular that looked expensive enough to have required either poor judgment or somebody else's credit card. Jerome shut the truck door. "What's in the jug?" "Predator lure." Randy loosened the cap. Jerome caught one breath of it and stepped back. "Put that lid on before the federal government detects it." Randy grinned, then noticed Kevin climbing carefully from the passenger side. Kevin still wore the gray coveralls, hood, gloves, and full respirator. The dark lenses hid his compound eyes. His antennae were folded beneath the hood, giving the top of his head a shape that was unusual but not yet actionable. "Who's that?" Randy asked. "New helper." "You got a helper?" "Apparently." Randy leaned sideways, studying Kevin. "What's wrong with him?" "He's Danish." Randy considered this, then nodded as though Denmark had explained worse. "He speak English?" "Understands a little, don't speak it." Randy stepped closer and raised his voice. "Do y'all have mountain lions in Denmark?" Kevin looked at Jerome. The translation collar warmed against Jerome's neck as Kevin made a faint questioning click behind the mask. Jerome kept his voice low. "Don't react. He'll think it's communication." Kevin stood perfectly still. Randy pointed toward the roof, then curled his fingers like claws and made a snarling face. Kevin slowly turned his head toward Jerome. "He thinks you're making excellent progress," Jerome told Randy. Darlene opened the front door. She was a small woman in a flowered housecoat with silver hair pinned up and the determined expression of somebody who had already decided how the job should be done. "You bring a cage big enough?" she asked. "I brought one suited to the evidence." Darlene glanced at Randy. "He says it's a mountain lion." "Randy says a lot of things." Jerome walked toward the side of the house, Kevin following close behind. Randy followed both of them, which Jerome had expected in the same way a man expected humidity. The soffit above the kitchen window was torn open. Insulation clung to the gutter. Muddy prints marked the siding below it. Jerome crouched. "Raccoon," he said. Randy lifted the thermal monocular. "Could be juvenile cougar." Jerome traced the direction of the tracks with one finger. They crossed the porch roof, descended the drain pipe, and continued through the flower bed. Kevin pointed to the prints, then toward the road. Jerome nodded. The prints led away from the house. More marks surrounded the foundation: squirrel claws, bird droppings, tufts of fur caught on a nail. Different animals had used different exits, but all of them had been leaving. While Randy checked his boots, Jerome moved toward the porch. Behind him, the speaker clicked on. Wolf howls erupted across the yard. The birds launched from the power line. The squirrel vanished over the fence. Beneath the Buick, the raccoon shot into the bed of Randy's truck and wedged itself behind the toolbox. Randy raised both arms. "See? Flushed him." Jerome stared at the truck. "You done moved one raccoon from under a car into your personal property. That ain't removal. That's ownership." Something heavy crossed the attic. The roof timbers groaned. The speaker fell silent. Then Randy's own voice came from behind the attic vent. "This thing knows I'm on to it." Nobody moved. Kevin's hand slipped beneath his coveralls. Jerome caught his wrist. Darlene looked up at the roof. "What kind of bird does that?" Jerome watched the vent. "A talented one." The porch ceiling cracked. Dust drifted down between them. Something began moving toward the attic hatch. Jerome made Randy leave the rifle on the porch. Randy objected on the grounds that nobody had ever regretted bringing too much gun to a mountain lion. Jerome pointed toward the ceiling. "You fire upward in a one-story house, you ain't hunting. You're installing a skylight." Darlene led them inside. The hallway smelled of dust, old carpet, and something animal underneath both. Muddy paw prints crossed the linoleum. A kitchen cabinet stood open, and a torn bag of crackers lay beneath the table. Kevin followed silently behind Jerome. His respirator filters had begun pulsing faster. Darlene noticed. "Is he all right?" "Sensitive lungs," Jerome said. "From Denmark?" "Mostly." The attic hatch sat in the hallway ceiling, with a pull cord hanging down. Jerome held up one hand. "Everybody hush." They listened. Something scratched once above them. Then nothing. Jerome stepped beneath the hatch and tilted his head. Kevin pointed toward the ceiling, then pressed two gloved fingers against the side of his respirator. Before Jerome could interpret the gesture, Randy grabbed the cord. The folding ladder dropped open with a wooden clatter. A wave of warm air rolled into the hallway. It carried damp fur, droppings, hot insulation, and a sharp chemical smell that made Jerome's eyes water. Kevin recoiled. Blue light flashed across both filter cartridges. Randy looked pleased. "See? Predator musk?" "That ain't a phrase you know enough to use," Jerome said. Randy climbed the first 3 rungs and raised his flashlight into the opening. The beam swept across torn insulation, crushed cardboard boxes, and several small shapes pressed against the far rafters. Jerome saw 2 squirrels, 3 birds, and a raccoon crouched so low its belly touched the boards. None of them moved. All of them were staring into the same dark corner. Randy whispered, "Got 'em surrounded." Jerome looked up at him. "They're hiding. From us." Jerome studied the animals. "No." He placed one hand on the ladder. "Come down." From somewhere beyond the flashlight beam, Jerome's own voice answered, "Come down." Randy froze. A microwave beep sounded from the darkness. Then came a perfect imitation of Randy coughing. The animals crowded tighter together. Jerome repeated himself, "Randy, down!" Randy climbed 1 rung higher. The ladder jerked upward. Randy shouted as his shoulders vanished through the hatch. Kevin lunged forward and caught both ankles. For 1 alarming second, he pulled hard enough to lift Randy's entire body straight out from the ladder. Jerome grabbed Randy around the waist. Together they hauled him back into the hallway. Randy landed on the floor, missing 1 boot. Above them came a wet, tearing sound. Then Randy's voice said from the attic, "I got equipment." Jerome looked down at Randy's sock. "Not as much as you did." Clear strands clung to the ladder. They stretched between the rungs like melted fishing line, shining faintly in the hallway light. Jerome reached towards them with a screwdriver. Kevin slapped his wrist aside. Randy sat up. "Your Danish boy just hit you." Jerome looked at Kevin's flashing filters, then at the clear residue. "He says the air may be toxic." Kevin nodded sharply. Darlene backed toward the front door, and Randy scrambled upright. Jerome pointed outside. "Both of you. Kevin's equipment says that lure of yours could react with whatever's up there." Randy was out the door before Darlene. Once they were alone, Kevin pulled the respirator aside. Jerome's translation collar warmed as he spoke. "That material formed the seals around catheric specimen chambers." Jerome stared at him. "You had live cargo?" "Survey vessels collect biological samples." Jerome took out the small communicator Kevin had given him. "Ship lady, check containment." A pause followed. Then the ship answered through the device. "1 specimen chamber is empty." Jerome looked toward the attic. "Retrieve it." "The organism cannot be isolated from surrounding biological material within the occupied structure, meaning you might take the animals, the customer, or half the house. That is a simplified but accurate description." What was in it? Unclassified adaptive scavenger, environmental assimilation capability, isolation mandatory. Escape likely occurred during terrestrial cargo transfer following the command incident. Jerome looked toward the ceiling. "It rode out with my equipment?" "That is probable. I am adding delivery charges." From the darkness above, Jerome's voice whispered, "Not yet." Kevin kept watching the attic while Jerome examined the damage in the kitchen. The alien had pulled his respirator aside now that Darlene and Randy were outside. The translation collar turned Kevin's clicks into a tense, careful voice. "The classification is imprecise," Kevin said. "An adaptive scavenger does not reproduce an organism completely. It acquires useful traits from what it consumes, observes, or survives." Jerome held up a battery with 1 corner chewed away. "So it steals the useful parts and guesses at the assembly. Available organisms got copper in them." Kevin took the battery and turned it between his gloved fingers. "It may also incorporate resistance to environmental hazards." On the counter lay a stripped length of electrical wire, the remains of a leather work glove, 2 punctured detergent pods, and an empty box of mouse poison. Jerome looked toward the ceiling. "So it eats whatever might help it survive, or whatever attempts to kill it." "That feels unnecessarily personal." Kevin glanced at the attic hatch. "We should seal the opening and introduce immobilizing vapor." Jerome nodded toward the frightened animals above. "And them?" "They have been exposed. Their biological integrity is uncertain." "Meaning?" They may require disposal. Jerome looked at Kevin. Kevin's antennae lowered slightly. Jerome set the ruined battery on the counter. Most things people call pests ain't evil. They're hungry, scared, or living somewhere somebody decided belonged to them instead. The specimen is dangerous. I wasn't talking about the specimen. Kevin followed Jerome's gaze toward the attic. The native animals possess no strategic value, he said. Jerome reached for the animal control pole. Killing everything is easy. Knowing what not to kill is why people pay me. He climbed first. The attic air pressed hot and damp against him. Kevin followed, moving awkwardly on the ladder but quietly once he reached the boards. Jerome pointed toward the animals. Don't watch the teeth. Watch the weight. Kevin looked at him. Scared animals lean toward whichever way they think they can run, Jerome explained. Cornered ones keep their eyes on the thing they're scared of. The birds were easiest. Jerome guided two toward the vent while Kevin blocked the rafters with a flattened cardboard box. The squirrel came next. Kevin approached too directly, and it snapped at his glove. Slow, Jerome whispered. You ain't arresting it. Kevin lowered himself, waited, and shifted the pole a few inches at a time. The squirrel finally darted into the small cage. Kevin stared at it as though he had completed a diplomatic negotiation. Jerome gave him a short nod. Better. Two raccoons remained near the far roofline. One trembled against a beam, eyes fixed on the dark space behind the chimney. The other sat perfectly still. Jerome started toward them. Kevin touched his arm. The alien pointed first at the frightened raccoon, then at the other. Jerome studied it. Its paws rested neatly together, too neatly. Its chest rose at the wrong speed, then corrected itself after watching the real raccoon breathe. The false animal turned toward them. Its mouth opened wider than a raccoon's mouth had any business opening. Inside were small needle teeth, two flat human-like molars, and something curved like a bird's beak. Kevin took one step back. The creature looked directly at Jerome. Then, in Jerome's own voice, it said, Knowing what not to kill is why people pay me. The false raccoon moved first. The real one bolted through the torn soffit as the mimic came off the beam in a blur of gray fur and mismatched limbs, claws striking wood where Jerome's hand had been a moment earlier. Jerome swung the animal control pole across its path. The creature twisted in midair. For half a second, its back feet became narrow bird claws. They caught the rafters, held, and changed again. Block the hatch, Jerome told Kevin. Kevin moved toward the opening. Then Jerome's voice shouted from behind him. Kevin, open it! Kevin reached for the ladder before he looked back. The real Jerome was still across the attic, wrestling the pole free from a strip of clear fiber. Don't listen to it! Kevin froze. That was enough. The creature flattened itself in a way no animal with bones ought to manage and shot between his legs. It dropped through the hatch, hit the hallway wall, and disappeared around the corner. Jerome tore the pole loose. After it! They scrambled down the ladder. From the kitchen, Jerome's voice called, Go left! Kevin turned left. Jerome caught the back of his coveralls and hauled him right. New rule, Jerome said. Look at me before obeying me. The creature crashed through the kitchen. Cabinet doors flew open behind it. A bottle of cooking oil hit the floor and burst. By the time Jerome reached the doorway, something low and pale was crouched beside the spill, lapping quickly. Kevin pointed toward an aerosol can rolling beneath the table. The creature seized it in its teeth. Metal crumpled. A sharp chemical hiss filled the room. Jerome backed away. Well, now it's moisturized and insect-resistant. The creature raised its head. In Darlene's voice, it whimpered, Please don't hurt it. Jerome stopped. The words were soft, frightened, and exactly timed. Kevin shook his head hard and pointed at the creature, then at Jerome. "I know," Jerome muttered. "I just don't appreciate wildlife learning emotional blackmail." The front door opened. Randy stepped inside wearing one boot, one sock, and the rifle Jerome had left on the porch. "Darlene," he called. From the bedroom came Darlene's voice. "Randy, help me." Randy ran toward it. Jerome grabbed his shirt as he passed. "Darlene's outside." Randy looked through the front window. The real Darlene stood beside the Buick, watching the house with both hands pressed to her mouth. Behind them, the creature darted beneath the kitchen table. Jerome lunged with the pole. Kevin moved to block the pantry. The creature screamed like an injured cat. Kevin hesitated. It squeezed through the floor vent. The grill struck the linoleum and spun. For a moment, all they heard was scratching beneath the house. Then the sound began moving. Across the kitchen, under the hallway, toward the front wall. Jerome hurried outside. The raccoon beneath Randy's toolbox hissed at him. Birds wheeled above the roof. Nothing moved in the grass. Kevin emerged behind him and pointed. Fresh scratches marked the dirt beneath Jerome's pest-control truck. From inside the cargo compartment came the soft click of an aerosol can rolling across metal. Jerome closed his eyes. "That truck contains enough poison to make it ambitious." Jerome sent Darlene back inside and told her to shut every door and window she could find. "There may be ruptured pesticide containers in the truck," he explained. "You smell anything sharp, sweet, bitter, sour, metallic, medicinal, or unusually clean, hold your breath and reconsider your afternoon." Darlene hurried toward the house. Randy stayed where he was. "I can tolerate fumes." "You opened that jug on purpose," Jerome said. "Your judgment is already chemically compromised." He handed Randy the cage containing the squirrel and pointed toward the far side of the property. "Take this around behind the barn and release it near the tree line, slow and quiet." Randy accepted the cage with both hands. "You trust me with relocation?" "No. That's why I gave you a squirrel instead of something expensive." Once Randy had disappeared behind the barn, Jerome turned to Kevin. The alien pulled his respirator aside. "The organism has entered a compartment containing multiple toxic compounds," Kevin said. "Delay increases the probability of adaptation." "Delay and patience are not the same thing." Jerome eased one of the truck's rear doors, opened 6 inches. The cargo compartment was dark and unnaturally quiet. A glue board clung to the wall at shoulder height. Several bait boxes had been torn open, and a thin stream of insecticide dripped from a shelf onto the floor. Something shifted behind the fogger. Jerome placed a cage beside the bumper and opened its door. Inside, he set a sandwich from the cooler, a handful of cat kibble, and the remains of Randy's missing boot. Kevin watched him. "Why include the footwear?" It already showed interest. Jerome crouched to one side of the doors and waited. For nearly a minute, nothing happened. Then a pale paw appeared behind the fogger. It rested on the metal floor, changed subtly at the wrist, and became something closer to a raccoon's hand. The creature edged forward. Jerome did not move. It sniffed the air, watching the open cage. Its body remained hidden, but Jerome could hear a wet clicking as it tested different teeth behind the shelving. Kevin shifted impatiently. Jerome raised one finger without looking at him. The creature extended its head. Its face had settled into an imperfect raccoon shape, though the eyes blinked one after the other instead of together. It took another step toward the sandwich. Kevin glanced at the leaking pesticide, then at the creature. Before Jerome could stop him, Kevin slipped a flat silver marker from beneath his coveralls and activated it inside the truck. A faint blue pulse passed through the cargo compartment. The creature recoiled as if struck. "What did you do?" Jerome hissed. "A containment scent should guide it into the cage." It was already going into the cage. The creature screamed in Kevin's clicking language. It launched past the bait, seized the glowing marker in its jaws, and struck the floor hard enough to knock over the fogger. Jerome grabbed for it, his glove closed on changing fur, slick skin, and then nothing. The creature compressed itself and vanished through a rusted drainage hole beneath the shelving. Jerome dropped to one knee and looked under the truck. A pale shape raced through the grass toward the woods, the silver marker flashing between its teeth. Kevin stared after it, antennae lowered. "The marker is linked to the vessel," he said quietly. Jerome rose very slowly. "You gave it directions home." From behind the barn came Randy's triumphant shout. "The squirrel's deployed!" Jerome closed his eyes. "At least somebody's operation went according to plan." Jerome told Randy the escaped animal was carrying a toxic tracking tag and might now be chemically unstable. Randy heard only the word tracking. "I've done pursuit work," he said. "You followed your ex-wife's boyfriend to a bowling alley." "That was surveillance." Jerome pointed toward Darlene's porch. "Stay here. Keep her inside. Keep the rifle pointed somewhere unoccupied, and do not pursue anything." Randy nodded with the solemnity of a man accepting orders he had no intention of following. Jerome and Kevin climbed into the pest control truck and headed down the narrow farm road beside the woods. The ship tracked the stolen marker from above, hidden beneath its cloak, while its voice came through the small communicator resting in Jerome's cup holder. "Marker signal moving northeast," the ship reported. "Speed variable, direction unstable." Kevin pointed ahead, then made a splitting motion with both hands. Jerome glanced at him. "You think it's making more than one trail?" Kevin nodded and scattered his fingers through the air. "Pieces," Jerome said. "Fur, spit, whatever else it's picked up." Kevin nodded again. In the rearview mirror, Randy's dented green truck appeared at the end of the road. Jerome sighed. "Of course." Randy pulled alongside at the next bend and shouted through his open window, "It's running a counter-tracking pattern." Jerome kept his eyes on the road. "You're the reason instructions come with pictures." The marker signal stopped near a drainage culvert beside an abandoned feed barn. Jerome parked, and all three men got out. The barn leaned slightly toward the field, as though years of weather had persuaded it to leave but not yet agreed on a direction. Rusted equipment sat in the weeds around it. Through the open doors, Jerome could see split grain sacks, old fertilizer drums, fuel cans, and enough rodent nests to support a small local economy. Randy crouched by the culvert and lifted his thermal monocular. "Heat signature's weak." Jerome looked at the device. "Cap still on." Randy removed it without comment. Kevin knelt near the roadside. Clear fibers clung to the fence wire, and pale tufts of fur had been arranged beneath a bush with suspicious neatness. In the mud, prints shifted from raccoon paws to narrow claws, and then stopped entirely. The communicator crackled. "Marker located within drainage channel," said the ship. Randy peered into the culvert. "I can fit." Jerome looked him over. "That sentence has ruined many weekends." While Randy prepared to crawl inside, Kevin studied the field. A pair of crows sat calmly on the culvert. Mice moved through the grass nearby without urgency. Kevin touched Jerome's sleeve and pointed toward the barn. Along its roof line, every bird faced the open doors. A half-wild barn cat crouched beneath a tractor, staring into the darkness. Even the insects seemed to keep their distance. Jerome looked back at the culvert. "Marker's bait." Kevin nodded. The ship spoke again. "Secondary composite biological signature detected inside structure." From the barn came Jerome's own voice. "Kevin, come inside." Kevin turned. Jerome caught his shoulder. "New rule still applies." Behind them, an engine coughed to life. Randy's truck rolled backward through the weeds. Something sat upright behind the wheel, its paws changing shape as they worked the steering column. Randy lowered the monocular. "That thing can drive?" Jerome watched the truck lurch toward the road. "Drive is a generous word," Randy reached Jerome's truck first and climbed behind the wheel before ownership could interfere with access. "Get in," he shouted. "I'm going to box him against the barn." Jerome opened the passenger door. "You are not ramming your truck with my truck. Yours has the reinforced bumper. It has rust shaped like reinforcement." Kevin climbed into the middle. Randy stamped the accelerator and sent them across the field after the green pickup. Ahead, the creature fought the steering wheel with paws that kept changing shape. "You got a suspended license," Jerome said. "Let's respect your limitations." The green pickup crashed through the barn doors. Randy followed until Jerome reached across Kevin and pulled the parking brake. Their truck spun sideways and stopped 6 feet short of the wall. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Jerome looked upward. "Lord, I appreciate intervention, but next time I would prefer something gentler than Randy's driving." Randy climbed out. That was controlled. The barn doors sagged inward. Chickens poured through gaps in the boards, followed by mice, 2 barn cats, and a goat that had apparently been living there without permission. Kevin stared at the fleeing animals. His gloved hands trembled. Jerome noticed. Kevin reached beneath the seat and pulled out the mason jar of batch 37. Randy blinked. "You let the Danish drink on duty?" "It's medicinal over there," Jerome said. Kevin lifted his respirator just enough to take a swallow. His antennae rose beneath the hood, giving it 2 brief pointed bulges. Randy frowned. His hat moved. "It's my latest batch. Be glad it only moved his hat." Kevin coughed into the mask, steadied himself against the truck, and pointed toward the barn. Then he crossed his forearms in front of his chest, lowered Jerome's animal control pole with one hand, and gestured for Randy to put down the rifle. Randy looked at Jerome. "What's he saying?" Jerome watched Kevin's gestures, then studied the animals gathering at a distance. None were running anymore. They had turned to face the barn. "He says we keep chasing it. It keeps learning new ways to run." Kevin nodded. Inside the barn, metal scraped against wood. Randy's voice called from the darkness. "I got him." The real Randy flinched. Kevin pointed to an old livestock trailer beside the building. Its door hung open, and the interior was narrow, dark, and lined with rotten straw. Jerome understood. The creature had spent the entire morning fleeing noise, poison, traps, and people trying to corner it. Every new threat had taught it another defense. "Stop acting like predators," Jerome said. Randy looked offended. "I ain't acting." Jerome pushed the rifle barrel toward the ground. Kevin retrieved the silver marker from the culvert and placed it near the trailer, then backed away and crouched beside the wheel. Jerome lowered the pole and ordered the ship to stop active scanning. The farm went quiet. After a minute, something moved inside the barn. A pale raccoon shape emerged, changed into a long-bodied animal Jerome did not recognize, then settled into something low and cautious. It watched the open trailer. In Jerome's voice, it said, "Kevin, come inside." Kevin glanced at Jerome. Jerome stayed silent. Kevin took another small drink, set the jar in the dirt, and did not move. The creature crept toward the trailer. Randy whispered, "Danish boy's got nerves." Jerome watched Kevin hold his ground. The creature reached the trailer ramp and stopped. Its copied raccoon shape trembled along the spine, fur giving way to pale skin, and then returning in patches. Kevin remained crouched beside the wheel, one hand resting near the mason jar, but no longer touching it. For once, Randy stayed quiet. The creature placed one paw inside the trailer. Then it looked toward Kevin and spoke in Jerome's voice. "Get away from it." Kevin glanced at the real Jerome. Jerome did not move. The creature took another step. Randy raised the rifle. Jerome saw the barrel rise and said, "Don't." Randy fired. The shot tore through the trailer roof and sent rust, straw, and splinters into the air. The creature screamed in 6 different animal voices at once. Its body expanded, shoulders rising beneath its skin, as claws punched into the dirt. It struck Randy before he could work the rifle again. He landed against the trailer wheel, and the creature came over him, larger now, with raccoon forelimbs, a bird's hooked feet, and teeth collected from several poor decisions in nature. Kevin moved first. He stepped between Randy and the creature with both hands empty. The creature hissed in Kevin's own clicking language. Kevin's shoulders tightened, but he did not retreat. Jerome lowered the animal control pole. "Easy," he said. "It ain't hunting, it's cornered." Randy reached toward the rifle. Kevin kicked it out of reach. The creature's head followed the weapon, not Randy. Kevin noticed. He removed the silver marker from the dirt and placed it farther inside the livestock trailer. Then he backed away slowly, keeping his body turned sideways instead of facing the creature directly. Jerome understood and moved with him. The creature remained over Randy for another long second. Then, as the rifle lay still and the pole stayed lowered, its shoulders began shrinking. The claws softened. Its breathing slowed. Kevin pointed toward the trailer. The creature watched him. Behind the respirator, Kevin made a low, etheric clicking sound. Not a command, Jerome realized, but something gentler. The scavenger stepped away from Randy. It entered the trailer, following the marker into the darkness. Jerome closed the door. Inside, the creature scratched once, circled twice, and became quiet. Jerome let out the breath he had been holding and offered the Lord a brief, private thank you. Randy sat in the dirt, staring at Kevin. What did he say to it? Jerome considered the question. Danish. Randy nodded faintly. Sounded serious. They are a serious people. The ship retrieved the secured creature from the trailer after dark. Once Darlene and Randy had gone inside to argue over whether military raccoons qualified as an act of God. Jerome told them the animal had been removed, the attic would need repairs, and Randy should avoid firearms until his judgment returned. Darlene asked when that might be. Jerome told her he did not provide that service. Back at the shed, Kevin stood beside the workbench while Jerome wrote the invoice. Attic inspection, multi-species wildlife removal, hazardous contamination, specialty containment, Randy surcharge. Kevin finally spoke. My actions allowed the specimen to escape. Yep, I disobeyed your instructions. Also, yep. Kevin waited. Jerome tore a new Pritchard pest control patch from an old shirt and tossed it to him. You also fixed it, saved Randy, and learned that dangerous ain't the same as disposable. Kevin held the patch carefully. Am I still under consideration? Jerome picked up his coffee. Congratulations. You're an apprentice. From the woods, the ship's voice came through the radio. Commercial affiliation update complete. Jerome looked toward the speaker. What commercial affiliation? Pritchard Pest Control is now associated with the vessel's active command registry. External service inquiries may be submitted. Jerome looked at Kevin. Kevin straightened. Jerome sighed and reached for his cap. Raise the travel rate. All right, this is Jerome with a quick message to you. If you enjoy this particular professional disaster, hit the like button and subscribe to A.H. Mayweather's channel. Apparently that helps the little machine recommend us to folks who might enjoy questionable moonshine, alien paperwork, and professionally managed chaos. The next catastrophe ought to be on the screen in front of you. If it ain't, check the Interstellar Pest Control playlist. If you're looking for other books or audiobooks by A.H. Mayweather, the website's in the description. Thanks for listening. And remember, if it scratches, bites, glows, or violates the known laws of physics, call somebody qualified. If they're unavailable, call Pritchard Pest Control.